Hello, and welcome to TIFF Rewind, presented by Bell. Today we're going back to Eastern Promises, which premiered here at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2007. I'm Cameron Bailey. I'm the artistic director and co-head here at TIFF. TIFF is located on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee. This territory is protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We're grateful to be working on this land, and we're committed to learn and to share more of the stories of Indigenous people here. We encourage you to reflect on the land that you're on as well, and its history. Big thanks to everyone who makes what we do possible here at TIFF. Our lead sponsor, Bell, our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oréal Paris, and Visa, as well as our major supporters, the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario, and the City of Toronto. I'd also like to thank our members and our donors for their continued support. This year, TIFF invites audiences to take a walk down memory lane as part of TIFF Rewind, presented by Bell. It's a free series of digital talks with filmmakers and actors who revisit past film premieres at the festival, and you can watch the talks with special guests on TIFF's social media channels or on TIFF's digital platforms during the festival. With a Crave subscription, Canadian audiences can stream the films on the best of TIFF's selection here on Crave. And today we're revisiting David Cronenberg's Eastern Promises. It made its world premiere as a TIFF gala presentation on Saturday, September the 8th, 2007 in Roy Thomson Hall. It went on to win the festival's People's Choice Award. That first audience was captivated by the audacity of Cronenberg's film, which is set in the Russian migrant crime world of London. And they were dazzled by the lead performance of Vigo Mortensen, who went on to much acclaim for this role, including an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. It's my great pleasure to welcome back to the festival, Vigo Mortensen. Welcome back, Vigo.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
Good to have you here. We're going all the way back to 2007. Eastern Promises came out a couple of years after you had worked with David Cronenberg on A History of Violence. In both of those movies, you play a man who has the capacity to kill, but these are very different characters. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what the path was from your character in A History of Violence to Eastern Promises.
Well, History of Violence being the first time I worked with David, we shot in the autumn of 2004, and the movie was at TIFF. Was it 2005?
That's right, yeah.
Right. And that was a great experience getting to know him, working with him. The character in that movie was quite different from the character in Eastern Promises. But there was something similar about it, about both characters, in that, sorry, I'm speaking like this, there's a little bit of an echo. Anyway, you're not hearing it, right?
No.
Okay, good. The similarity of the two characters was that they were pretending to be someone they were not. Mm-hmm. And they both required a certain stillness, trusting that the character would come across in key moments with very little, gesture, physical movement, just subtle things. And I had learned on History of Violence to trust David, that he was looking for those things and he would care for them during the shoot and as I saw in the end result in the editing. And that was true of Eastern Promises as well. But it was my first time at a big premiere, History of Violence at TIFF. And it went to Cannes, but then at TIFF, because it's his hometown, it was an amazing experience. And then, but Eastern Promises was truly stunning. I remember being at Roy Thomson Hall, packed house, a lot of important actors, directors came to see what David had done. Mm-hmm.
And what you had done?
What we'd all done. And Naomi Watts was there, Vincent Cassell, and I I wish Armin Mueller-Stahl had been there. He's great in the movie as well as the Godfather figure. But it was a wonderful experience. Great long ovation at the end, and yeah, it was an important springboard for Eastern Promises. Just a month or so before its release, I think.
You went on to get an Academy Award nomination for your performance as Nikolai. And I want to actually go back to building that character. He's a really unique character, I think, in your filmography and in cinema generally. Really remarkable, scary man. And I guess it often starts with the screenplay, in this case written by Stephen Knight, who'd written Dirty Pretty Things. In terms of building Nikolai, because I know you did a lot of research for that role, what was in that initial script that you read, and then how did you build from there?
Well, it was a really well-structured story, and the more I got into the research, the first thing I did, I was in Los Angeles at the time, living there, and I'd got to know David well during History of Violence, and we'd stayed in contact afterwards, speaking not just about movies, but all kinds of things. And as we started to prepare this, we talked a lot about the way Russia was at that time, the history of organized crime, what we knew about it, what we could find out, but also Russian literature, music, art, history, and politics. And one of the first things I did is I found someone, a Russian, who helped me translate all the dialogue that I had. Not that I was going to speak Russian the whole time, but in speaking with David, we probably were going to add a little more than was intended, where in the script it said in Russian, whatever. There's only a few places, and it seemed like we might do a little more. And anyway, I just wanted to be ready. It was good exercise. And also talking to this Russian person about sense of humor, what things are, just the emotional through line of the character. I also went to Russia, which taught me a lot about what people laugh about, the way they express themselves, how they are in a tactile sense, how people are guarded in a way, and
what kinds of things did you pick up in being in Russia? What did you learn that you didn't know before you went?
Well, it didn't surprise me, but I didn't know how fatalistic their sense of humor was. You'd hear things like, the few people I talked to, they might say something like, well, it's been a good week, or it's a good day today. But then there's tomorrow. Like they're always expecting something terrible to happen. Maybe it has to do with centuries of oppression and suffering. I don't know. I don't know.
A lot of terrible things have happened.
Yeah, it was just watching how people interact on the street, in bars, subway stations, on the trains, in cities and in the country. I mean, I ran around quite a bit. Moscow, St. Petersburg, and then I went to the interior, to the Ural region, Ekaterinburg, where Nikolai is supposed to be from, or says he's from. I rented a little car, drove around, just saw a lot of stuff. One thing that was interesting, and I wasn't looking for this at all, but I was in a hotel there one night and I was watching Putin. This 2006, would have been October, I guess. And he was giving a nationally televised speech. And his body language is like perfect control, and laser focus, and the way he held his hands and the look in his eye. I just started watching him, and I even turned the sound off just to watch his body language, and that gave me something. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but it helped me with Nikolai's body language and his sort of physical attitude, the way he looked at people, kind of almost this always sizing up the situation, sizing up the person in front of you, almost like a quiet, predatory potential at all times, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's definitely there in the film and in your performance. There's also an element that is very much a part of the story, which is the tattoos that he has, that are a part of Russian gangster lore. And I understand you did some research there as well.
Yeah, I did. I saw a film by Alex Lambert, American woman who's made several documentaries. She's an artist, plastic artist, and she went on her own to Russia because she wanted to make a movie about this traditional Russian criminal tattoos. And she somehow got into several maximum security prisons and spoke to both male and female prisoners, murderers, thieves, I mean, dangerous people, to ask some questions about these tattoos, about what they meant. Now things have evolved, and they were even when she was making the movie, where the younger generation of criminals were starting to use things that you see all over the world, you know, Polynesian style tattoos and so forth. But there were still remnants of the old code. You know, your tattoos spoke about what crimes you'd committed, how many sentences you'd served. For example, the tattoos on my back in the movie that have the church, you know, how many cupolas, how many towers, each represent a prison term, for example.
Okay.
Some tattoos say whether you were in for murder, for robbing, for, you know, rape, anything.
They tell your story.
Yeah, they tell your story. And so that wasn't really in the script to begin with. And I showed this movie to David, and David got to know Alex a bit. And there's also some books that you may have seen, or some of your viewers may have seen. Russian Criminal Tattoo. There's, I think, 2-3 volumes, and those have, you know, a lot of those tattoos. And we took some of those and some other ones that I found, and that's what we ended up covering my body with. And it probably affected some of the writing. You know, Stephen Knight then wrote a scene where I'm being interrogated. I have to pass a test in front of the mobsters, and they look at the tattoos and read my body, and question me about it, question my loyalty, want to see if I'm authentic or if I'm BSing, you know, which could be the end of my life. Not just that I wouldn't be accepted into the family if I was caught lying. Like in her documentary, it's described how when prisoners in those jails sometimes would find someone had a tattoo that claimed a deed, a crime that they actually hadn't committed, they were forced to cut it off with a knife or have it burned off, pinned down, it was removed from their body, and then they were beaten up, and who knows what else. But so they were serious about the tattoos. It was kind of like your passport.
There's so many really memorable moments, images associated with your character in the film. The first time when he puts out the cigarette on his tongue, suddenly that tells you so much about who this guy is. And then there's a moment where it feels like he should be completely vulnerable. The fight scene in the bath where he's naked. He has a towel at first, and then that's it. Okay, yes, you have to fight to defend your life with nothing. You know, you're completely exposed. But you also see his strength and his power in that scene as well. And it's really such a memorable scene. Can you talk a little bit about just establishing who Nikolai is through those physical elements? You know, what he'll do physically, and then that fight scene in particular.
Well, that was something when I was in Russia. I also found in a used bookshop this manual, military manual, with photos of hand-to-hand fighting tactics. And I showed this book to one of the guys that was in that fight. There were two Chechen people. The actors were actually a guy from Georgia, the country, not the state in the United States, who had been in the Russian military. And he said, oh, yeah, these are things we trained in. So we incorporated some of those moves into the fight. And the other guy was I guess of Turkish origin, a heavyweight boxer. And they were really good stuntmen and actors. So it made that fight much more realistic, I guess. But we worked hard on the choreography, and I knew as we were preparing it that it was going to be painful. It was going to be uncomfortable. And the nudity was really, it just made sense. I mean, your towel's not going to stay on through a fight like that. So I didn't really think about that. It was more being really focused so as not to get hurt, obviously, but also, or more than, you know, the bruises, just to be able to complete the fight successfully and to have it look real and original, you know. We worked really hard on that choreography, and David was quite efficient, and Peter Sushitsky is cinematographer. They did a great job planning how to shoot that scene. And I thought we were done in one day, which would have been great. But they said, we need a couple close-ups of some things. So we'll do that tomorrow morning. And when I came in the next day, you know, it was a process putting these tattoos on or touching them up. It took a while. We got it down to, you know, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, whereas it had been a couple hours at first. But then it took another hour at least that morning to also cover all the bruises from the day before, because all those landings on the floor and all that. But other than that, you know, I mean, we knew it was going to be uncomfortable and awkward, but that was part of what would make it believable.
What kind of a director of actors is David Cronenberg? You've worked with him, 3 films completed, 1 film on the way, and you had this remarkable cast around you on set as well, Naomi Watts and Armin Mueller-Stahl and so many others. What's he like with his actors?
Well, he's really good at casting to start with, which is it was important. He knows that at least half his job is done in terms of getting performances in the casting process. And he's very careful about that, very attentive. It's not like he has you read. He talks with you. He might have you read, depending on the part. But he's looking at you, looking at your body language, and seeing how you react, I suppose, to his questions. So he selects the cast really well. And then he trusts his casting. I mean, he's had a lot of experience directing. So that's part of why he knows how to get a good performance. But he's also tried it. He's a good actor. So he knows the process. He knows how to help people. He can adapt to different kinds of actor, different kinds of acting styles. And he's very open, not just to the actors, but to the crew. Questions, concerns they might have. He's not really into rehearsing at all.
No.
But he's open to conversation, suggestions at all times. And he's very observant. I said that about History of Violence, but it was also true of Eastern Promises. He was very attentive to the most minimal gesture or change of gears from many of the actors. And he's, when I say trust the casting, he doesn't really step in and tell you to do something or correct you unless it's absolutely necessary. He doesn't really interfere with what you're doing unless he has to. But you can feel the confidence he has in you and having selected you and in what you're bringing to the table. And he's not such a control freak that if you surprise him with something he didn't expect, he doesn't automatically shut down and discount it. He sort of thinks about it for a minute, and he might say, well, that's interesting. Well, let's try that again with a little bit of this added to what you're doing. Or he might say, yeah, that's interesting, but that's not what I want. It's good for an actor to feel that the director's A, paying attention, and B, knows what he wants. It inspires confidence, at least as far as I'm concerned.
The last thing I want to ask, Vigo, you mentioned that David is a director who has acted and sometimes acts in other people's films. You're an actor who's directed recently. I wonder if there's anything that you've picked up having worked with David over all these years that you use in your own films as a director.
Definitely. There's some other directors. I mean, I've worked with some really talented men and women from different parts of the world, and the best of them, like David, but he's probably the top in this regard, regardless of their backgrounds or their directing style or storytelling style, they all have in common, and this is something I shared with the crew in the movie I directed, Falling, on the first day. And that was to say to them what I've learned from the best, and I was thinking of David in particular, is that a good idea can come from anyone at any time, and it's to your advantage as a director, as a storyteller, to keep your mind open, your ears open, and to encourage participation, suggestions, questions, to not be threatened by that, because it can be useful, and so I said to the crew, I said, we have a short shoot. Please don't tell me you're a great idea about today's scene. Don't tell me about it tomorrow or a couple days from now. It'll be too late. We can't go back and do it again. We don't have that kind of budget or schedule. And and the other thing is that you can't prepare too much or too far in advance, and David is really meticulous about that. He's thinking about his shots. He's thinking about the tone of his story each time out. I mean, there are certain things that I suppose tie his movies together because it's the same director, but they're all remarkably different. Even the three movies I've made so far, History of Violence, Eastern Promises, A Dangerous Method, they're all quite different in tone, the way the camera's used, even the approach to storytelling. He's always efficient, and technically he's on top of his game, but they're all quite different. And this one, Crimes of the Future, the one we're starting in a few days, we're going to start shooting, that will be quite different from the other three as well. And I just prepare really well and always keep an open line of communication with your cast and your crew.
Thank you. Vigo, it's been great going down memory lane with you about Eastern Promises. It's been, 14 years since it was here at the festival.
Wow.
But I watched it again recently, and it is as dazzling as ever. Although it's a very still film, you just feel kind of just wowed by it when you watch.
Well, he's brave as a director, because other fine directors, if they were directing a movie like Eastern Promises, it would probably be a lot more showy in terms of the camera work. There'd be more shots. The editing would be perhaps, I don't know, frantic is the word, but more noticeable, I guess. And he's brave enough to be very simple, allow not just my character, but the camera to be very still at times, and to tell scenes in terms of shot selection in a very straightforward, subtle, and direct way. Other directors, I don't know if they would have done that with that kind of story.
Yeah, the story lends itself to being a little bit more, a lot of flourishes in the direction, and he doesn't do that. And I find that stillness and that intensity actually has a greater impact. And your performance is,
because when he does go for it, in terms of the speed and the number of shots, when it gets amped up, it means a lot more, because it happens in selective moments. That happened in History of Violence as well.
Yeah, there's some really remarkable sequences in that film as well, where you're kind of shocked by what suddenly happens.
Thank you by the way, for showing this movie again at TIFF, to the TIFF audience. We had a great success in 2007. I remember it won the Audience Award.
Yes.
And as I say, it was a great springboard for the movie to then go out to the public after the festival. And it's great that I forgot it's so long.
Seems like yesterday. Well, thanks again for taking the time to talk about it. And if you're in Canada watching, you can go over to Crave and watch Eastern Promises for the first time or for the 10th time. That movie is just one of the greats. Vigo, thanks again. Thanks very much for doing this.
Thank you.